Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 podcast, available wherever you're listening now.
Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies, inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Welcome to Wake Up Heavy, the world's greatest horror movie podcast. In this episode, my weird dad will be talking about
Stephen King, author of Carrie, said, "Evil Dead is the most ferociously original horror film of the year. If you think he's kidding, see for yourself." Evil Dead. They got up on the wrong side of the grave. Evil Dead from New Line Cinema.
We are back once again with Mike White from the Projection Booth podcast. Thanks for being here, Mike.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate this.
I am looking forward to all of your Michigander connections with the Evil Dead. So hopefully you've got some stories like that.
Oh, man. Now, nothing like put me on the spot.
Well, let's start like you normally do, and I try to do when I have a guest. When was the first time you saw The Evil Dead, and what did you think?
I first saw The Evil Dead. I specifically remember going over to a friend of mine's house, and I think he and a few friends had already watched it, but they liked it so much that they were like, "Oh, come on in, you need to see this," and they ran it for me, and they were just so impressed by the many colors of blood. That was one of the big things. And I think it was pretty soon thereafter that I saw Evil Dead 2 and was really shocked by the difference between the two. But because I really remember Evil Dead, the original Evil Dead, actually being very scary, even though I watched it during the day in a fairly well-lit rumpus room. I still remember being kind of freaked out by it. And the one thing I remember specifically is there's a shot of the camera looking down and going across, and there's some beams. And every time a beam would pass in front of the camera, you'd get this whoom noise. And just so the idea of the sound and the image and the way that they played with those two things, I really appreciated then and still do today.
I was 16 when I first saw it, and this was a VHS rental, and I had been hearing about it for a while. I know that this had a long pre-history before an official release, and probably caught some pictures in Fangoria and things like that, although I wasn't a huge Fangoria reader. Once Stephen King saw it and had his little blurb put out, it caught a lot of people's attention. So I don't know whose idea it was to rent it, but we took it back to my house and watched it, and I was really blown away and freaked out in about equal measure by it. And I think it was one of the first films that I really realized was a low-budget film. That kind of stuff never really entered my mind when I was watching a movie. I just figured, movies get made and they cost however much they cost. But just, I guess, the gritty look of it, and of course it was on VHS, and it probably wasn't the greatest of transfers, but that the makeup, just the overall feel kind of made me feel like, this was a bunch of guys that went out and shot this guerrilla style and had a lot of fun. But the sense of dread was the thing that I really came away with, kind of like you, the soundscape and the images. And even though you can tell this is low-budget special effects, they're so gloopy and gloppy and, fairly well done for the money they had. It just kind of really dug in as this is really, really creepy.
When they did a good job, too, of the whole idea, this one didn't go for the jokes as much as, obviously, the others would, but there were the lighter moments mixed with the heavier moments and the pauses mixed with the mayhem, and I really liked how those pauses, especially towards the end of the film, just were filled with dread, and it was just a feeling of like, okay, what else is going to happen to these guys or this guy? And just how bad is this going to get? Because it just seems to get worse and worse as the movie goes on. But you have those moments where nothing is happening or just you're waiting for the next thing to happen. And they would take that and kind of replace it with jokes in the second one. And in the first one, there are some of the lighter moments, but it really does a good job of taking you to the edge and then bringing you back and then pushing you and pulling you. And it just, that this was, one of their first feature-length film for Sam. It's just remarkable that they were able to have that balance, and just it's so well edited.
When I watch it pretty regularly, but the beginning of the film sets the mood perfectly. Once they get up to the cabin and they're kind of parked far back and everybody gets out and what's his name, Scotty, goes up to the door and there's the banging swing on the side of the cabin.
Yes.
And I noticed it when I watched it yesterday, just straight through with no commentary or anything, that you start hearing that sound as they're pulling up. And that is what works. That's the kind of stuff that works for me and still works for me with this movie and others, where that slightly off-kilter thing and nothing but that sound, and then it stops. And some people maybe in this day and age would see that as sort of a cheesy scare, but it works for me and sets the mood, or set the mood, that dread for the rest of the film. And I like that this, and we can kind of get into the differences of the sequels later, but I prefer the non-comedy, the non-Three Stooges comedy in the first one, and I think is why it stuck with me more than any of the others have throughout the years. Interesting thing with all the material that you sent over, which I appreciated very much, the thing that struck me about that, a lot of that and a lot of the commentary was more about the business of the film and how this was really their way to, I guess, be financially independent, and it was seen as a business venture. And even all of their research, going to drive-ins and seeing, when people would get restless while they were watching some exploitation film and start honking their horns or flashing their lights and stuff, and how they kind of found the beats of horror movies and exploitation films, and being that they created a production company before they started making the movie, just it almost kind of became, for me, what the movie was about. Was not so much, yes, we love film, but this is going to be what we do and we want to be successful at it.
Yeah, it was very calculated. Seems like a bad word, but they just had such a great way of going about things and planning, and just being very determined that this was going to be their life. They had been doing this in school and I mean, gosh, grade school, high school, but then especially in college, but that they were just like, okay, this is going to be us. We are going to be doing this. And that it was, the whole group of these guys doing this, and that, it wasn't just Bruce Campbell like, oh yeah, I'm going to be an actor, but also being part of the sound group and wanting to edit the sound and really, getting his hands dirty with that, and Taper being just so determined with everything that he was doing. I mean, I do appreciate that it was looked at as a business venture as much as a friendship, as much as an entertainment, and that they were just like, okay, this is going to be our calling card. This is the best way that we can get a foot in the door.
Right, because you can have all the talent in the world, and Sam Raimi may be, may have been even then kind of a wonderkind, as a lot of people like to describe him. But if you don't have the means to get it shown and out there, or even get it made, you can have all the talent in the world and it doesn't matter. In our day and age, now we have films being funded by Kickstarter campaigns and I guess GoFundMe isn't for that kind of stuff, but there's a production company right now, and I forget the name, Legion M, where you can buy a share of the company, and I think that's how Mandy got made. And this was, let's go to the wealthy, quote-unquote, people that we know, the dentists, the doctors, the lawyers, and show them this little film that we made prior to, and give them a taste of what we're going to do, which takes a lot of guts for one thing, because those probably aren't the people that would be interested in a super over-the-top, gory horror film, but, they were successful, so...
Right, and I know that they had kind of seen what other directors had done, and they knew that that was a good first step. So, if memory serves, they had a whole, prospectus that they would show people, and just, here's our business plan, and we're very well thought out as far as all that goes.
Yeah, and I think that had a lot to do with Rob, is it Tappert or Tapert?
I usually say Taper, but it's probably Tappert.
I'm not sure, so I'll go with Tapert. And I guess he was a business major, so he that was sort of his thing. And you can see it in the interviews, a lot of that business side of it. And even recently watching the little clips at the end of Ash vs. Evil Dead, he would always have a little thing to say, and a lot of it was about the business part of getting that show made. So that was his bread and butter, and it was a good combination of those three for as long as it lasted.
Well, I think people tend to forget these days that he and Sam were behind the Xena and Hercules franchises, and those were the most popular syndicated shows for their time and still have legs today.
Yeah, I had no idea about that until I think I started watching Ash vs. Evil Dead and didn't realize that Rob Tapert was married to...
Lucy Lawless.
Yeah, and of course she guested on Ash vs. Evil Dead, and then I thought, oh, this all makes sense now. And a couple of the other shows I think that they produced for Bruce Campbell, Adventures of... I never
Briscoe
watched
County Jr.?
Yeah, I never watched any of his shows, but I'm pretty sure their production company was behind that as well. I may be mistaken. That, to me, became one of the more interesting things in that compendium that you sent over. I read through the whole thing and thought, boy, they could have been as talented as anyone, and it really wouldn't have mattered if they hadn't had some of that business sense, at least, to get this into festivals later on and to get it seen by the people at New Line and all. None of that would have happened if they hadn't had that initial backing, which the business acumen helped with.
Yeah, I can't remember if they did Briscoe County, but I know for sure that Sam helped produce Jack of All Trades.
I'm going to defer to your knowledge on this.
Sure, that might not be a good idea, but okay.
Seeing as you're a Michigander, so...
I put a lot of stock into this whole idea of the Midwestern work ethic that we have, and that really seems to come through with these guys, and that they have put their fingers in so many different pies over the years, and it's always just such a treat for me to see how they've managed to infect other areas with this kind of Michigan quality and drive. And, even that Bob Murawski, who wasn't there with them originally, but then ends up kind of coming in and being Sam's editor for years, that he's from, I think it's not Battle Creek, I think it's Big Axe, Michigan. So it's just like this whole Michigan connection just continues with these guys throughout the years, and that they work and swap projects with each other all the time, and that you'll see like, oh yeah, here's Ted Raimi shows up in this. Well, who was behind this? Oh, it's Sam doing this thing, or Ted doing this thing on his own, but then he'll bring in Bruce. So it's just this wonderful kind of conglomeration of talents.
Yeah, and I know I'm kind of being jokey about it, but I was going to ask, if you saw a particular connection there with that part of the country and with, that area. I'm not sure how close all of those cities are to where you are or how close they are to Detroit, but just that if it seeps through those movies in any way. And I guess that was the answer. So that's good to know. And I do recognize that it's kind of like, and I'm going to get this wrong as well, but the Pittsburgh connection with Tom Savini and George Romero, and then later on with Greg Nicotero, and how all these guys find each other and then and yet become tops in their fields in Hollywood, in the movie world, and kind of bring those people together as well. And of course, Nicotero worked on Evil Dead 2, so that kind of, I don't know how close Michigan is with Pennsylvania, but you still have sort of that other side of the country feel to some of this stuff.
Pittsburgh is only about 5 hours away. Cleveland's about 3, and if you make a right turn, you go to Pittsburgh and you're 2 hours past that.
Well, there you go. So, making Hollywood gross and gory all the way from the Midwest.
I think Sam and Bruce, I want to say that they were just north of the city over in like Ferndale maybe, and Royal Oak possibly, and then I think a lot of them coalesced at MSU, so over in East Lansing, which is about maybe an hour and a half west of Detroit. And then when Renaissance Pictures had an office, they actually had an office, I think, on Woodward and 9 Mile, so right up in Ferndale. So it's all local grown here as well. And then even when it came to, we had a great program a few years ago for film in Michigan. We were giving all these great tax incentives, and they actually built a huge studio out in Pontiac where the Lions used to play, and that was where Sam made the Great and Terrible, is it Great and Powerful Oz? The one with James Franco.
Mm-hmm. Great and Powerful, I think.
Yeah, I keep wanting to say terrible because that was kind of my opinion of the movie.
I can say I'm a nitpicky fan of Sam Raimi's. Some of his movies really work for me and others really don't. It's not like I don't know, Lynch or Scorsese or something where you got to see every one, and I kind of enter each one now with a little bit of hesitation because I don't know what I'm going to get. But as far as these movies go, though, I do enjoy all three of the Evil Dead trilogy. I did want to discuss the style that does kind of permeate most of Raimi's work that is evident from the beginning in The Evil Dead with the inventive camera work. That was the other thing that really stuck out to me on my first watch, was I didn't understand how they were running through the forest. I didn't understand how they were going over the pond, going through cars, which I think isn't actually an Evil Dead 2, but all that stuff just kind of blew my mind. I had no idea. I couldn't figure out how they were shooting that, and this is evident when you get up to even The Quick and the Dead, and it's been a long time since I've watched any of the Spider-Man films, but I know that kind of restless, energetic camera work continues through just about everything except maybe a simple plan.
I mean, I can tell you a little bit as far as the actual shaky cam and how that they would actually take a 2x4 and then mount the camera in the middle of the 2x4 and then have two guys on either end running at the same time and able to dip down and go up and around and all these things. So it was kind of their homemade Steadicam was having these two people hold either end and able to move through space that way. As far as going through the car, I'm not sure how they did that. Probably sawed the damn roof off and lifted it up, but
I actually know that one from listening to. I did know the shaky cam, but I just meant more like when I was a kid and first watching it, like, you know, how did they do that? But the Ramo cam is the one that goes through the car, so it was just mounted on a pole that they shoved through the car window, you know, breakaway glass on the back, and the front I think was already broken out, so they used a variation of that to smash out the windows. Either in the first or the second, they start to get conflated when you think back. That was basically had a little piece of wood that extended past the camera lens, so that when they got close enough to the window, it would break the glass and leave the camera okay. So a couple variations of the Ramo cam, and then with the spinning mechanism in, I guess that's the end of Evil Dead. No, the beginning of Evil Dead 2, when Bruce Campbell has to traverse the trees and spins around and stuff like that. It was done like on a cherry picker or something, you know, cranked it really low speed so that it would come out fast. And a lot of really, really interesting use with things that they could manufacture themselves. Handy and smart and business-wise. It's a good combination.
Yeah. And then I love the whole idea of what they would shoot backwards rather than relying on forwards. All the in-camera camera tricks that they would do. One of my favorite things from the, I think it's the commentary on Evil Dead 2, is I want to say it's, oh gosh, I can't even remember which gag it is, but I remember Bruce saying, Sam Raimi's the only guy who could yell at me about my terrible ability at backwards acting.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I remember that. And that's the kind of stuff that when you were casting something, maybe it was Crime Wave, and you mentioned on that little watch party about, I think, Louise Lasser turning from the window and how it was just the reverse shot from the original when she turned around normally. And a lot of times you can kind of tell when it's reverse stuff, but when it's those action things, because they employed it quite a bit, I think, in both the first and second Evil Dead. I know in Evil Dead 2 with the vines going into the woman's face, they're pulling them out and filming in reverse. And, you know, it starts to boggle your mind a little bit thinking about how that setup works. Figuring that stuff out is very fascinating to me. And I know, and it's a good way to just the simple act of when one of the girls is possessed and she scratches Scotty's face, that her hand going into his face was actually filmed in reverse, so she's pulling it away because you don't want someone with long fingernails lunging at somebody's face. And I thought, oh yeah, that's why that looks strange. I never would have thought that simple action would be filmed in reverse.
Yeah, and that's what also helps give that movie just that edge of weirdness. You know, some of those moments where someone is demon possessed and they're moving their head around, and then you show that in reverse and suddenly it's otherworldly.
Right. Well, and that kind of brings up the special effects, which I mentioned earlier, were fairly clunky and gloopy, but effective. And yet there's something, again, I don't know if it's that otherworldly thing, but there's this shot where the possessed Linda, and I'm going to try and be good with the names here because I'm awful at remembering character names, but Linda, who is, Cheryl, who is Ash's sister, stabs one of the other girls in the Achilles tendon with the pencil. And I know in my brain that it's fake, and it probably looks really obviously fake to people when they watch it, but for some reason when I see that, it doesn't look that fake, and it really turns my stomach. And that's sort of how I feel about a lot of those clumpy effects in the movie. They're almost, I don't know if it's to an absurd level or something that kind of swings it back around again to being really realistic to me. And that's what sort of really got under my skin the first few times I watched the film, and still kind of upsets me when I watch it. And I am fine with gore and all that stuff, and I know everything's fake, but I don't know, something about those in that first movie is upsetting or off-putting to me.
Well, it also helps that they hold on it for a long time and that it's a pencil and not a knife, because you can kind of feel it more than if it was a knife being stabbed into her, that you can feel that pencil, and just that it's such an everyday, ordinary object being used in such a horrific way. You know, it's not meant to go into somebody. It's not meant to cut something, but then seeing it go so deep into her skin, it's just like, ugh.
That was a good description. I'm feeling it all over again.
Right? Yeah. I mean, the use of the makeup on the faces, the contacts for the eyes, and then the sound, you know, having those low rumbling sounds coming from these people, having their voices distorted out of their mouths. I mean, it makes the effects even more off-putting.
The soundscape is really important throughout, and what kind of sets the first one apart for me is that low rumbling ominous sound, as opposed to Evil Dead 2 when we start to get the cartoony sounds, and we kind of level off that dread, and there's a lot of blood in Evil Dead 2, but it's you know, not accompanied by that low drone, and the voices in there are a lot more menacing. And so again, it works on a much almost more of a primeval level than any of the sequels. And that you mentioned that holding on a shot long enough, and that's how I always feel when he is ramming his thumbs into Scotty's eyeballs.
Oh yeah.
And again, you know, it's a dummy head, but it matches pretty well with the makeup he had, and it's just way too long to show that. That's one of my bugaboos in films, is eye stuff, and I almost have to turn away at that part. Smart to you know, overdo it a little bit.
Right. And that's what these movies were always so great at, was just pushing the limits, and just really, you know, like I said, like, it's not just red blood. You've got black, you've got white, you've got green, and it's just a matter of like, how much are you going to start pouring around?
And that was, I think, their attempt, at least in the later movies, to maybe tone it down a little bit, to not have the flowing red blood all the time, to possibly avoid an X rating, which obviously didn't work in either case. But the milky blood is the one that always gets me, or the milky liquid is the thing that, again, kind of upsets my stomach. And I've seen it in a couple other films, and it just, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's just because it looks too much like vomit and I am grossed out by vomit or what, but that is effective.
It has kind of a pus look to it.
Yes, I think that's the thing. You hit it right on the head there. And I love the integration in this of the stop motion effects, especially towards the end, and how that got put in with the live action with the composite shots. And again, you know, we're talking about guys that had really only been doing short little 8mm non-sound films for a number of years, and how they got that matched up so well. I mean, I know that it kind of wavers a little bit, but they cover it with some sound effects. But for the most part, it's almost impossible to tell where the stop motion ends and the live action stuff begins.
Yeah, they had so many neat tricks. I mean, one of my favorite is just the mirror gag, where he puts his hand into the reflection and it's just obviously water, you know, and they show it for so quickly that you can't register, oh, that looks bad, you know, like, because we've had a previous shot of him in the mirror, and then you cut away, then cut back, and then that's the water gag. And it just reminds me of when I was growing up, and all of the movie magazines that were out there, movie making magazines for young filmmakers, and I'm sure that they had these in Sam's time as well, which were how to do these tricks. I mean, the whole idea of like forced perspective, or, you know, shooting. I remember one article I read where it was like, you would write your titles backwards, put him on a stand and then have a pool of water with ink in it below, and then you could shoot the reflection of the titles, and then you would shake the water and then be able to put a new title on there and then have the water smooth down, and that's how you could do like a title wipe effect or even like a memory effect if you were to project something onto that, or like how to shoot backwards, how to turning the film stock upside down and then being able to shoot on that, or project it back that way. So it was all these little tricks and stuff that they would have, and I'm sure that they were trying to master all of these things, and especially like, you take a look at something like I think Scott Spiegel. I can't remember if it was Spiegel or Becker, but I think it was Spiegel that did like Cleveland Smith and the Waiters of the Lost Park, and just all of the strange little effects that they would do in there, where it's even like Bruce Campbell on top of a dinosaur head. So you've got like the stop motion dinosaur, and then cut to him kind of like balancing, those kind of things. It's just all those little neat tricks that they were perfecting in those shorts before they would get to their feature film.
Yeah, and they work and they match up, like I say, better than a lot of big budget stuff, at least for me. And I don't know if it's a nostalgia thing or if I'm just kidding myself, but I can obviously see that this stuff is stop motion and it's clay, but it's done well and it's done quickly. And then we get the big explosion at the end when the big creature arms come out, and that's obviously live action. And then we get the kind of disintegration of the figures, and it just all works as much more smoothly than you would expect it to be able to.
Yeah, they were really good at knowing when to use what effect.
We haven't really talked about the story, and it gets kind of lambasted for not having much of a story. But I find the simplicity, especially of the first one, to be really refreshing and just lets you sit there and kind of get washed over by red, blue, black, and green blood while you're enjoying it. And it made me think about the kind of origins of the cabin in the woods trope. And I put out some feelers online and stuff, just trying to think, I couldn't think back to a really old incident of cabin in the woods style film. And a lot of people kept bringing up the movie Equinox, which I mentioned to you, and I'd seen it a few years back. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not, but again, low budget student film. And of course, I'm not going to remember the guy's name now, but he has gone on to, he's the head of ILM or maybe not the head, but one of the lead special effects guys for ILM, and came to George Lucas's attention because of this movie that he had made with the stop motion creatures. And there is
Dennis Muren, I think.
Yes, right? Yes, that's exactly right. And so I refreshed my memory on those and rewatched both versions and prep for this, and didn't really see too much of a connection between those and the Evil Dead, other than, there is kind of a quote-unquote Book of the Dead in Equinox and some stop-motion creatures and some really interesting front projection matting with live action and stop-motion. So I know that one of the head special effects guys had seen it. He said, Sam and I never discussed it, but as a movie fan, as a famous monsters fan, it was promoted quite heavily in that magazines. I guess in a roundabout way, it did kind of at least influence his work on the film. But there's a cabin in that film, but the people in it never get to the cabin. And I kept racking my brain. I found some mention of a movie called The Red House with Edward G. Robinson.
Yeah. A friend of mine recommended that to me a few years ago. Yeah, I can see that. My mind kept going to all the way back to 1932's The Old Dark House, the James Whale film.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I came back to. It's not really, it was just a cabin for them because that was what they got. But it's the old dark house thing, the 5 or 6 or however many people trapped in one locale. And a lot of crazy shit goes down. So I guess that's the essentials. And I guess the direct lineage for Evil Dead would be more akin to Night of the Living Dead, which I know was an influence for that idea of people being trapped in one location, or even Texas Chainsaw Massacre once they kind of all get to the house there where that family lives. Then I started thinking about, where we've gone from there into parodies and spoofs that we've had in the last, nearly 20 years now, with Cabin Fever, and then we have, of course, Cabin in the Woods, and the movie that I think does that better, Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Oh, God, yes. I love that movie.
I think they play their hand too early in Cabin in the Woods, knowing right off the bat that this is all a government-manufactured event that happens. It probably would have been better left to the middle of the second act or something, but that's just me. But for me, this is the ultimate Cabin in the Woods tale, because it's an actual cabin in the woods. It's not campground slasher material. We're not talking about masked killers going after kids, but the story is simple. We've got 5 friends: Ash, his sister Cheryl, girlfriend Linda, and then Scotty and Shelley. And they uncover unnamed evil by reading passages from the Book of the Dead. And whether that is told better in The Evil Dead or in its subsequent sequel or reboot or requel, The Evil Dead 2, I'm not sure how to categorize it. It was very confusing to me. And I know I'm not the only person to say this, when I first saw Evil Dead 2.
Oh, yeah.
The confusion followed me through the whole film, at least the first 2 or 3 times that I watched it. I couldn't quite understand what was happening at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the very first time I saw Evil Dead 2, and I think I might have been prepped. Because, I think somebody told me about it first and told me it's basically the first movie, but done as a comedy. And so I was okay going in and seeing that. I kind of had the same feeling that you're having or had when I saw Desperado and had been such a huge fan of El Mariachi. And I was just like, he's doing the same thing. What's going on? How can this be? And I was so confused, a little angry, a little anxious. And and then it took me a while before I was like, oh, he's doing an Evil Dead 2. Okay, I get it now.
I think is what I thought, okay, this is just a remake, but what does the beginning have to do?
Right.
No, that's not right. It's a sequel. Well, then what does the beginning... Right.
Why would he go back to that cabin? Why would the idiot Ash go back to the cabin?
Which he's not. Yeah, so that was it was one of those, a couple things, they couldn't get the rights to recap the movie with actual footage from the first one, because whoever, the rights were tied up in a million different ways, and to get permission from every country that would show it would have been impossible to do. It's also my understanding that they did think about shooting with the original people, kind of a recap, then said, no, let's simplify it and have Ash and Linda going to the cabin under slightly different circumstances, and then the same kind of thing happens to the 2 of them. And then we get our new story with whole new characters. They are not supposed to be the same characters from the first one, and then we go on from there. So it finally makes sense to me now. It's just done in such a way that the movie gets kind of choppy and doesn't have, for me, the flow, the ease of the first one.
Yeah, I think I actually prefer the second one to the first one, just because I love the comedy and the inventiveness that they bring to it in the second one. And I guess I'll go ahead and say it, the camp that the second one just revels in.
And that was going to be my question to you. There's debate, and I put out a poll that got all of 13 responses, and most people, 60-something%, went with Evil Dead 2, which is what I expected, and it's what I hear just in my limited scope with the horror world. I don't not like the movie. It's just that the humor for me takes it down a notch because it's not the humor that I grew up really enjoying. I did not watch The Three Stooges when I was a kid.
I was not allowed to see The Three Stooges.
Okay.
Of all the things that I could watch, I could go see The Blues Brothers and Blade Runner in first run when I'm 8 and 10 years old, but I was not allowed to watch The Three Stooges.
This is something that I need to explore. What is the reasoning behind that?
My mother just didn't like the violence, didn't want me, like hitting somebody on the head with a frying pan thinking that it wouldn't hurt or anything. Because, when you watch those, they are incredibly violent. But, she just was like, oh, that's a bad influence on a kid.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I was more of a Little Rascals guy.
Oh,
so,
love the Little Rascals.
Yeah, that was sort of a more almost surreal kind of humor in a way sometimes. Weird things would happen, and they were kids, and I kind of enjoy that world. So The Evil Dead The Evil Dead 2 beyond being a little bit confusing, that Three Stooges-esque humor just takes it down probably a full notch for me as far as grading goes.
I see so much more Three Stooges in the Medieval Dead and Army of Darkness that's where it loses me. It's like I love the first one as a horror film. I love the second one as a horror comedy, and the third one just doesn't feel like anything. That one always leaves me cold.
Yeah, I watched it today. I think this might be the second time that I've watched it all the way through because I generally don't make it past the first part. Actually, before he goes into the forest to find the Book of the Dead and ends up in the windmill and all the stuff that actually really, really hits those beats from the first two. Because I don't really remember that happening. But yes, there are overt Three Stooges gags in that one, and that is, again, when it kind of loses me. We're in 1300 and something, and we're doing Three Stooges gags with skeletons and, everybody speaking in colloquial English. And
which is funny because that is Sam Raimi's bread and butter. I mean, that was the sappy sap and, the, what was some of those other ones? Like just the I think It's Murder had some of that stuff as well. And just like, he loved the Three Stooges, and that was like, okay, I get to do this up. But it's like, yeah, I'm right there with you. It's like, that's where Crime Wave falls down for me. That's definitely where Army of Darkness falls down for me. It's just like, okay, I like some parts of it. I like that it has the evolution of Ash into an Ash hole and has that whole, give me some sugar baby.
Give me some sugar baby.
And all those kind of things. Like, it takes the character into a different direction because in the second one, he is just tortured. In the first one, he is completely tortured as well. But yeah, there are moments for me in the third one that I like, but for the most part, it's just like, yeah, it doesn't do it for me. And I really liked that very end scene in the version that I saw in theaters, which was that homage to John Woo. And I was like, okay, this makes sense that he's going to work with John Woo when Hard Target came out. I was like, okay, all right, I can see those two sensibilities coming together. But that's about it as far as like what I find from the third one. I think I've maybe watched it 3 times. If it's on and my wife's watching it, I won't ask her to turn the channel or anything, but I just watch it and go, God, this could have been better.
I enjoyed it more than I thought I would because I kind of felt like I hated it before, but again, I don't think I've made it all the way through more than once before. I did enjoy the kind of swordplay towards the end with the final battle was done very well. Again, the makeup by K&B again is good. There are way more nods to the first 2 films than I ever realized. even in the windmill, kind of taking the place of the cabin or the woodshed from the first two films. The big fountain of blood at the beginning of Army of Darkness out of that well is kind of harkens back to the big fountain of blood in Evil Dead 2 coming out of the cellar. And that's one of the better gags from Evil Dead 2, I must say. And then, there's a mirror again, and just, kind of bits and pieces here where I guess we call it fan service these days that hit those beats or that echo those things from the first two films. So I was like, oh, I recognize that. I get what that is. And I think that made me enjoy it maybe a little bit more than if I had seen it early on with not much memory of the first two.
It also doesn't help that the delays with Orion Films and the bankruptcy of Dino De Laurentiis, and just that all of that stuff made that movie come out later than it should have, because it felt, after seeing Darkman, I was waiting for the next step in the evolution, because in each major film that he was doing, The Evil Dead, Crime Wave, Evil Dead 2, Darkman, it's just like these huge leaps that he's able to do from one movie to the other. And then going to Army of Darkness, which should have been before Darkman, it just felt like a step back instead of a step forward. So that was kind of equally disappointing that way. So I can kind of get past that now when I watch it, but when I saw it the first time, it just really was like, oh my God, these cheap ass fake skeletons, like what is going on here?
Was it shot before Darkman?
I think it might have been. It seemed like it was languishing for a while, because I remember De Laurentiis and Orion, there was all of these rights issues, and a lot of it, believe it or not, was tied up with the Silence of the Lambs. And I think that they sat on a bunch of movies as they were trying to fight about who owned the rights to Silence of the Lambs. And that's another reason why it took so long for Hannibal to come out. But I think Silence was 90, and then this came out in 92, but I want to say it was supposed to come out in 90 or 89, because I think Darkman came out in 90.
Yeah, that's an interesting time back then for all the De Laurentiis stuff. And I know that when I was reading a lot of that material that you sent and then hearing the commentary and kind of forgetting about De Laurentiis being involved in Evil Dead 2 and then I guess an Army of Darkness, thinking how it kind of paralleled with Don Coscarelli's story, that kind of upstart, talented filmmaker did the same sort of thing with the investors. I mean, he had some family money, but got professional people to invest in his film Phantasm, and came across De Laurentiis, in the 80s when he had scooped up most of the rights to Stephen King material and got tasked with writing the screenplay for Silver Bullet. And I thought, okay, well, Sam Raimi got kind of picked to do Thinner. Don Coscarelli didn't end up doing anything with Silver Bullet other than writing like one of the first drafts of the script. That then made me think about Raimi passing on Thinner, and then, years later doing Drag Me to Hell, which is a very similar story.
Very similar. Yes.
So that was my roundabout way of getting to that, and another disappointment for me with Raimi with Drag Me to Hell, and I remember hearing, Raimi's back with horror, and it has those Three Stooges moments in it, in scenes that could be really dark and creepy and gross and scary, and they turn into comedy, and it just kills that movie for me.
I will admit I've only ever seen it the one time, so I don't even really remember it. I think I rented it on VHS a couple of years after it came out, or maybe DVD. Yeah, I guess it was DVD at that point. And I saw it the one time. I haven't really gone back to it. I remember enjoying it.
I remember thinking, okay, yeah, this is the same kind of stuff that I didn't like from Evil Dead 2, and I don't even know if I had seen Army of Darkness at that point or not, and I gave it a whirl, I think last year. Thought I'll give it a go again. I get lucky sometimes and really tune into something the second or third time I watch it, and then it just didn't work. But then I forgot that he had directed The Gift as well, which I decided to throw on the other day because it's on Amazon Prime, and thought, well, this is kind of horror. And of course, that's much more understated, more in the line of A Simple Plan. You know, there's not a whole lot of tricky camera work, Dutch angles, sped up film, and things like that. It's a lot more stated story, and I kind of enjoyed it because of that. So I guess I don't know. This is all to say that I enjoy when it's mainly horror. So I'm going to, go out on a limb here and say that The Evil Dead is my favorite of the trilogy, and probably, when it boils down to it, one of my favorite Sam Raimi films overall.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think Evil Dead 2 still tops it for me, but yeah, that's still my favorite Raimi, though I really liked what he did. I liked Darkman a lot, and I wish that he had been able to continue with that character if he had wanted to, because those sequels are just not very good at all. I really like the simplicity of A Simple Plan, but it's not one that I go back to very often. And I really like what he did with the second Spider-Man film quite a bit.
Yeah, I did enjoy that one a lot. And I watched Darkman, again, knowing this was all coming up. I thought I'm going to watch as many of his films as I can. I had never seen Darkman before, even though I thought I had. And realized as I was watching it, nothing is hitting me in my old memory banks at all. Other than, clips that I've seen. I think there were maybe some clips in the Incredibly Strange Film Show from way back in 91, 92 maybe. I know
that
it was
sense.
After Darkman, but before Army of Darkness came out, so somewhere in there. And I think they had some clips, and I've watched that episode a handful of times through the years. So I enjoyed it. Again, some of the humor seemed misplaced to me. There's one of the goons with the bald head, one of the first people that I guess he transforms into, is you hear the burps and the farts and the things like that, and it seems sort of out of place for this guy that's supposed to be this big tough guy. I don't know. That I don't have anything against fart jokes, but it just seemed, again, like this is sort of maybe more of a serious story. That kind of loses me, but it did bring me back mainly in the end, towards the end of the film, with the chase scenes and the helicopter stuff and all that was pretty exciting.
No, I remember liking parts of that. I really liked, I always love when Ted Raimi shows up and stuff, and I loved his death in that. And yeah, that bald guy, I can't remember the actor's name, but he was one of my favorite characters from Swamp Thing. So I always liked that, and especially when he got transformed. His character's name was Bruno, I think, and he got transformed into Little Bruno, this little person that was made up like almost like a hedgehog or something. But yeah, it was pretty great. And then I loved Larry Drake. I'd only ever seen Larry Drake in LA Law, and then him coming out as this badass criminal. I was like, oh my God, this guy's amazing.
The only things I'd ever seen him in was LA Law and Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, and he basically plays the same character in both. So,
oh God.
Yeah, it was a big surprise for me, even so many years later, and I think he's passed, hasn't he?
I think he did, yeah. So no Dr. Giggles too.
Yeah. I mentioned this in jest, but I did kind of want to discuss real briefly here the unofficial sequels that we got from our wonderful friends, the Italians, much like the zombie or Dawn of the Dead sequels, I should say, that proliferated in the 80s back there. They, the distributors decided with the distribution rights that they had that they would go ahead and name these disparate films La Casa, which was what Evil Dead was called over there. So we got, and this is very confusing and strange, and I don't know how House fits into this, the movie with William Catt.
I went and I watched all of those House movies a few years ago, and then I was recently looking at a clip of a movie, and I was like, wow, this looks incredible. And Josh Hadley, who hosts the show that I was on, he was just like, you idiot, you've seen this already. We talked about this movie. And I was like, really? I don't remember this whatsoever. And I think it was one of these La Casa versions of House, because somehow House, like 3 or 4, becomes part of this La Casa series from Italy. It's like, what?
Yeah. I'm not sure how House fits in. I missed that in my research, but Evil Dead was La Casa in Italy, and so Evil Dead 2 was La Casa 2. There was a movie called Ghost House, which was La Casa 3. Witchery, which was La Casa 4, and this is the one with Linda Blair and David Hasselhoff. And then Beyond Darkness became La Casa 5. House 2 became La Casa 6. And The Horror Show with Brian James became La Casa 7. Yeah.
Brian James and isn't Lance Henriksen, yeah. I was just like, okay, yeah, this looks great. And yeah, that was the one where he was just like, go back to your notes. And I had to go back and actually listen to the podcast I was on, which I never do. And then I was like, it felt like I was listening to a different person.
I have not seen that one, and I think it's on Amazon Prime. I need to. I've seen all the other unofficial La Casa sequels and have enjoyed a couple of them. So,
the movie House by Steve Miner, story by Fred Decker, that's a great movie, and that stood out over all of them. And the second one was like, okay, but the rest of those movies, I was like, yeah, you can kind of keep those.
Yeah, and that, again, kind of hits that horror comedy stride a little bit. Maybe leans a little too far in the comedy direction for me. So I have given House, I don't know how many tries, and stopped it, and finally forced myself to sit through it. And then once I did that, I watched the second one, and they're enjoyable. I think you and I differ on our fandom with Fred Decker and Shane Black and that kind of crew that did like, the Monster Squad and...
Didn't like the Monster Squad.
What's the other one that they were involved in? Maybe Shane Black was in
Night of the Creeps?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Night of the Creeps.
Yeah, and that's another one that kind of is a mild miss for me. I would give it another go. I gave Monster Squad another go, and it still didn't really work. That was mainly due to the child actors, but I would be willing to give Night of the Creeps another go because it's got Tom Atkins in it, and how can you not like a movie with Tom Atkins?
Exactly. I will tell you another Michigan connection for the movie House is that the poster for that and House 2 were done by a guy that grew up maybe 3 cities away from me in Lincoln Park named Bill Morrison, who for a long time he ran Bongo Comics, which specialized in all of the Simpsons comics. And if you look at the poster for House, on the doorbell that the corpse is pressing, it says Morrison written on the door jamb. And then on the second one, it's a key that's going into a lock, and it says Morrison on the key itself. So there's a little bit more of a Michigan connection. He also did the poster art for School Spirit, and I believe that there's a locker on that says Morrison.
Oh, you learn something new every time you talk to Mike White. We haven't discussed the whole fake shimp phenomenon, which, again, I think I was clued into because of the Incredibly Strange Film Show. Have you seen those?
I remember recently watching the one on Russ Meyer, and I know that I've seen more of those, but it was one of those weird shows where I never knew, how can I put this, where they were coming from or where I could see them. It was just like every once in a while they would kind of come across my radar and be like, oh, fantastic. And I still recognize Jonathan Ross when I see him. I just saw him on the Great British Bake Off, and I was like, oh, hey, it's the guy from the Incredibly Strange Film Show. But yeah, God, I would love to have seen that entire run.
I don't know how I got clued into it, but I think I set up my old VCR to record them. I don't know. I don't remember what channel they were on, USA or TN, one of those cable channels. And the first season was, if I remember correctly, Russ Meyer, Jackie Chan, Sam Raimi, maybe one other exploitation director. I don't know if I might be conflating it with the book, the Incredibly Strange Films book from Research Research Publications, because they touch on some of the same people in that, and I always get them confused and thought they were connected for a long time, but I don't think there was any connection. That was sort of what brought me around to Sam Raimi again and made me really want to see Crime Wave, even though they disparaged it so much in that episode itself. The clips that they showed were just like, oh, how could this be bad?
Right.
Of course, as we know from watching it the other night, it can be bad.
It can be, and yeah, unfortunately it was. And that one just reeks of interference. I mean, that's how I felt when I was watching it. I don't know about you.
It's hard for me to tell what was messed with, because a lot of the humor is Sam Raimi-esque humor. I mean, even going back to Evil Dead 2, where when Ash's hand comes off, the vocalizations are fairly cartoony. You get a lot of that cartoon sound in Crime Wave, but from my memory, that was one of his complaints, that was, they inserted all these sound effects and things that weren't his idea and all this. So it's hard for me to figure out what exactly was messed with. And part of that is just the way I watch movies. I kind of watch movies like an idiot. They play out how they play out, and it's been released, so this was how it was supposed to be. I mean, I kind of take that view sometimes. Just I can't help it. That's just how my brain works. Like, I get that studios interfere. I get that producers have their say about things, casting, and all that stuff. But it's hard when I'm watching a film to go, oh, well, that was obviously studio interference. It falls flat. The pacing is off. Some of the acting is really wooden. And so that stuff is more maybe objectively bad than maybe they chopped up, maybe they rearranged scenes. I would, without reading a script or something, I wouldn't know how any of that unfolded.
Well, I know for sure he wanted Bruce Campbell to play the lead and not the heel. I mean, Bruce Campbell plays a great heel, and that's kind of like how Ash transformed over the years into the heel. But just our main character just was not doing it for me. And so many things where I was just like, wow, that could have been better. That could have been funnier. I mean, I absolutely love Paul Smith and Brian James in that. I thought they were great, but it felt like they were almost in a different movie a lot of times.
And the overdubbing just really killed it for me. And I couldn't tell if Brian James was overdubbed.
I think, well, obviously when he's using the female lead's voice, he is. But I think that was his voice. But yeah, it was only interesting for me that Dick the Bruiser overdubbed Paul Smith, because Dick the Bruiser was such a Detroit staple. He was, famous Detroit wrestler, and he was the voice and face of WRIF, one of our local radio stations, for years.
And now, the ABC News program, Meet the Bruiser. From our desk in Detroit, here is Richard T. Bruiser.
Thank you. A California legislator has proposed a bill which would require state regulation of sperm banks.
And he would even, if you went to see movies at United Artists Theaters, there was a short before the movie where he would break through the screen and talk about how he would come out in the audience and strangle people if they were going to talk during the movie.
Yeah, and this is someone I have no...
Yeah. Right. So hearing his voice coming out of Paul Smith's mouth, I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. But yeah, poor Paul Smith. I mean, I've seen the guy act. I saw him in Sonny Boy. He's fantastic. I mean, he barely says anything in Dune, but I know that he's got presence. So yeah, I think that was kind of a bad decision to do that.
Well, if you haven't seen Pieces, you should check him out in that. Oh,
fantastic.
You mentioned Ash's progression, and that was sort of what struck me in watching Army of Darkness, all the way through and saying, oh, this is really different from not only the second one, but the first one where he is just absolutely useless, up until the very end. In Evil Dead 2, he's got a little bit more hero aspects to him. He takes the axe instead of just standing there.
Now.
And then right from the get-go with Army of Darkness, he pops out and he's like you said, he's Ashhole, and he is, and that's what carries him all the way through Ash versus... Oh, now I forgot the title of the show.
Ash versus the Evil Dead.
Yeah, duh. And I watched that with hope for every episode and enjoyed most of it, and some of the episodes fell flat, but I was kind of forgetting that is what he had morphed into, having not really paid much attention to Army of Darkness before. Yeah, that's a character arc, I guess, for the ages.
Yeah. I liked his character in there, but after a while it was just like a little too much.
Right.
The first episode of Ash versus the Evil Dead will probably always be my favorite, just because it recaptures, it was directed by Raimi, and it just recaptures that energy. And you watch it and you're just like, wow, this is what I've missed. This is the Sam Raimi I remember and that I love and that I want more of, and that we just don't get. It's like, it's been so long since we've had a movie directed by Sam Raimi, and I'm hearing today that he'll do the next Doctor Strange, but then I'm thinking that he'll probably be fired by the studio before it ever actually happens.
Yeah, I think I saw right before I got on here, something popped up on Twitter, and I was like, oh, is he confirmed? Yeah, I'm always interested in something new from him. I'll take a look. As I said, I've liked a number of the films over the years. I don't know if sometimes I knew they were Sam Raimi pictures or not.
Oh, there's some where you just couldn't tell. Like, for Love of the Game, who the hell directed that?
Which is one I haven't seen, but even with The Gift going, oh yeah, I forgot that he directed this. And I knew it was a simple plan because, again, that whole... Coen Brothers connection that I had learned about on Incredibly Strange Film Show. I'm thinking, oh, this is kind of his version of Fargo. And then The Quick and the Dead, I remember enjoying very much the first time I saw it and seeing the fun camera work.
Yeah, there are some really good parts of that. It didn't necessarily hit for me the first time I watched it, just because I started going, wait, this is just a ripoff of Once Upon a Time in the West. But then watching it the second time and just being like, okay, this takes a lot from that, but it takes a lot from a lot of other movies as well. And then I was able to just kind of turn that part off, that little nagging film nerd, and just enjoy it. And even the first time I saw it, some of those shots, like the shadow and seeing the light coming through Gene Hackman. Oh, God, it's so good.
So I know that you're not a fan of the reboot, but I did watch it. That was the last thing I watched before recording today. So I am a fan. I like the gore. I like that it goes really far with that. I like the gender flip. And again, after, of course, watching all three of the originals before, really saw a lot more of the nods to the original, even including the Delta 88 in there at the beginning and stuff like that. So I consider myself a fan, and I enjoy that director's other films as well. So
yeah, I've only ever seen the theatrical version. Maybe I would like the unrated version, but for me, a lot of it was the whole overcoming the heroin addiction and just using that as part of like the surrealist nature of it, where it was, is this a dream? Is this not? And I just never really cared about anybody in the movie. And granted, in the first movie, like, I think it's kind of retroactive now, especially watching it and being like, okay, Bruce Campbell's in this movie, but he doesn't really shine until the last little bit of it, like you were saying. But I cut it a lot of slack. And the second movie is just all Bruce all the time. But in this one, it was just like, yeah, I don't know who these people are. It was good that they cast, I'm going to say, 4 or 5 unknowns, but people will probably be like, oh, well, of course that person was in this movie and this movie and this. And no, I didn't know anybody, didn't know any of these people. And so I had no stake with them. And then I could tell who was going to be the main character. And I was just like, yeah, but I don't care about her either. So it just never really clicked with me.
Yeah, no, I can see that, and it's one of those movies that has its staunch fans, and a lot of people absolutely hate it. I give it some slack because the original 3 did produce it and gave it its blessing, and I think I was sort of familiar with Jane Levy from the sitcom that she was on that I've only ever caught a couple times, but I knew who she was. I like her in a number of things, and she was in the director's second film, Don't Breathe, which I really enjoyed. The rest of the people, it kind of starts to hit that these kids are all assholes type of thing, which I'm not a fan of in modern horror at all. It's not as severe in this. I think the female characters aren't really depicted in a negative light. It's more the guys. And, of course, the idiot that's reading the book and calling the spirits is doing it after seeing don't write, don't hear, don't say, or whatever in the book itself.
Yeah. I mean, having the tape recorder be the thing, I think works better because it's just like, oh, you see a tape recorder, of course you're going to play it. And then it's just, it's like The Ring. You see VHS tape, of course you're going to play it.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. And that's one of the failings of the film. And you don't really care. I applaud the attempt at a story with the addiction background, and it's not really here nor there other than, like you said, to bring into question whether these are hallucinations from her withdrawal or if it's really happening. Of course, with the setup at the beginning of the film, you have to kind of conclude that it's actually happening, or why would they do that? But yeah, the gore is outrageous and stomach turning, and that I think kind of links it to the first one for me, at how far they go, and especially at the end with the just buckets of bloody rain coming down for a good 5 or 10 minutes to finish off the film. So I enjoy it. I understand that a lot of people don't, but it sort of brought it back around for me to the original Evil Dead.
I respect that. I know a lot of people liked it, and I'm not going to ever fault anybody for liking something.
Those touches, even the necklace is almost exactly the same design as the necklace in the first 2, and little stuff like that is silly, but I kind of enjoy it. So
I always get so tickled during the commentary when they're just like, "Oh yeah, you bought that at K Jewelers," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I know where that is, at the Tel 12 Mall, of course." So I think I definitely cut the originals more slack just because they are Michigan products, and there are times where I'm just like, oh yeah, that's cool, I recognize that, or I know that thing that they're doing. And there's not too many movies that are so Michigan that I can point at and be like, I am very proud that this was made in my, not necessarily made in my state, but made by people from my area.
Well, and that's the nice thing. There are some, to go along with that low-budget style of filmmaking and going over schedule and things and filming in Tennessee, but then also, when you get into the basement, it's Rob Tapert's basement in Michigan, and then
that impossible basement that just goes on forever.
Yeah. And then it switches to Sam Raimi's garage, and then the shots in the car at night were in the garage. And again, those are the kind of things that my mind, even though I read the commentary or listen to the commentary and read those that material you sent and know how it was put to, I know how the sausage was made. It's still a tasty sausage.
Oh yeah. I
can't believe I just said that. I forget about that as I'm watching. Okay, this is where he's walking, and it goes from the basement to Raimi's garage, and then we're back out to the woods of Tennessee. And even with Evil Dead 2, the same thing, even though they had set up kind of a makeshift studio in North Carolina, they still shot in woods and then had miniatures. There's one shot where the forest force chases Ash into the cabin, loses him, and then pulls back out. And there's a real subtle edit there, whereas it's pulling out, it goes from the set to the woods. So those are the things that really appeal to me about the first one, especially, and in parts in the second.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And yeah, I can get lost in those movies very easily. Rewatching The Evil Dead the other day, I was just like, this... Having the last time I had seen it before watching it for this show, I think I saw it theatrically projected the last time, and it was probably off of a shitty 16 millimeter print. And I've only really ever seen it on VHS copies. I think, I do have this on DVD. I probably watched it. It was probably one of the first DVDs I bought just for the commentary. That was probably in the late 90s, early 2000s. So watching it on Blu-ray the other day, I upgraded. I was just like, wow, this looks fantastic. I have never seen it look as good, which at times is great. And at others, I'm just like, sometimes seeing things on a shitty VHS is better because then you don't notice some of those effects either. And there's a lot of sins that can be hidden that way.
And if you're watching the Blu-ray, you don't get to see Rob Tapert in the distance when they're crossing the bridge, sitting behind the bushes. And see, you know what? That is something that I never caught until I read something, I don't know, IMDb. I don't think it's on the commentary. It might have been. Oh, there's Rob over there. And so watching it yesterday, I was like, oh yeah, there he is, duh. And never caught that before, so I guess it's been erased from the Blu-ray. And I think on my Evil Dead 2 DVD, I think they did a little bit of touch-up on the eyeball gag when it's going into her mouth. I know they'd use a couple different cuts. Again, we've got some backward filming there with the eyeball actually entering her mouth, but when it's flying across the room, it was just on some kind of stick that was, darkened, so it wouldn't film very well. Right. And on the behind the scenes footage, Nicotero was saying, "Oh, you can still see a little bit of it here in this shot," and they actually circled it, and I was like, "Oh yeah, there it is." But when I watched my DVD, I could not make it out at all, and I paused it and everything, and didn't see it. So
I wanted to say that being a Michigander, it's also interesting. I was at a party in Baltimore, after party for the first night of the Maryland Film Festival years and years ago. And I ran into this guy. I was introduced to this guy. Oh, hey, this is John Walter, I think his name is. And he directed this film, How to Draw a Bunny, from 2002. And I was just like, oh, hey, how you doing? He's like, oh, where are you from? And I told him Detroit. And he was just like, oh, talking to me about the white stripes and stuff. And he's like, are you a fan of The Evil Dead? I'm like, oh, of course I am. And he's like, well, I was the hand in Evil Dead 2. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? And he holds up his hand and starts moving it around. And then he flips me off with it. And I was just like, is this guy fucking crazy or what? And then I had to go back and look it up. And sure enough, he was the sound editor and he did the part of the disembodied hand in Evil Dead 2. So the same guy who's out there as a documentary editor and filmmaker, John Walter, is the guy who was the hand from The Evil Dead 2.
Which kind of brings up the whole fake shimp thing again, which I don't know if we fully explored or not, but having all those people take over parts, either for just an insert shot or being a full-on character that's made up, and you can kind of tell if you think about it, if you're not engrossed in the movie, okay, well, that looks like maybe that's a guy in a dress
yes,
and a wig and,
a lot of horrible wigs.
Again, the fake shimps are basically the behind-the-scenes people that take over, and I think there may have been in Evil Dead 2 about 4 or 5 people doing the hand in different ways, and
yes,
and an electronic one, and a all kinds of. I mean, that's just claymation, and a Jello one for when he stabs his hand, which actually looks really, really good. And
looks great.
Again, it's that kind of stuff. Those knowing how to achieve that quickly, cheaply, especially for these movies, and effectively, and at least the first two do that, I think, brilliantly.
I love the behind the scenes of Evil Dead 2 where they show Ted Raimi in the Henrietta suit and just the amount of sweat that he had sweated in the Henrietta suit. It's so disgusting.
Yeah, when they slowed down the footage that's in the film of it coming out of his ear, I just about lost it because I have never noticed that before, and I hope that I don't pick it up on my rewatches because that's disgusting. Sweat with whatever baby powder and whatever else they had to slather on him to get that suit on.
You talked a little bit about the Italian homages, let's say. Have you ever seen the Indian versions of Evil Dead?
No. I've seen some strange posters. I don't know if they were from India, but are they good?
I've only seen clips. I actually just ordered one that, if you look it up in IMDb, unfortunately they give it the title of Bollywood Evil Dead, and it really... they should call it Bakkezaya, or however you would pronounce it. There's that movie from 2008, and there's another one called Bayam from 2007. I've only seen clips from the 2008 film, and there are a lot of similarities. There's actually a great series, and I'm trying to remember what the name of it is, where there's a guy who will go through and talk about foreign remakes of things, and he has tracked down just some amazing clips of different things where it's just like, wow, I never knew that this thing existed. Like, I never knew that there was a Egyptian version of Rocky Horror Picture Show called Fangs. But since they can't show homosexuality in Egypt, they had to change so much of it. It's just incredible. But yeah, it's really kind of interesting to see how the Bollywood market took on the Evil Dead. And I know that there are a few Hong Kong films that would also use Evil Dead in the title of the American versions or the English translations, like... was it Evil Dead Shop or something? But I have...
Evil Dead Trap, which I think was on Prime for a while, and I started to watch it and realized it was a highly edited version, so I shut it right off because I can't deal with that.
Okay.
It's supposed to be very interesting, though.
Yeah, it definitely didn't feel like Evil Dead, though, when I watched it.
Oh, did you see it? Yeah.
Years and years ago. I mean, obviously that title is going to bring me in there.
No, that's what appealed to me, and I turned it on, thought, wait, something seems off here, and checked the runtime on IMDb, and it was much, much shorter than that, and I said, no, I can't.
I'm sure there's probably a VCD of it out there that you could...
I'm sure there's something I could pay for, but I'm such a cheapskate that I always wait.
Yeah, totally understandable. I mean, I appreciate having shows like this where I'm just like, I think I'll upgrade that Evil Dead disc. Okay. That's one of those things that I just you could go broke if you were just to buy different versions of Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. They put them out so often, and it's just like after a while I'm like, enough. I can't do it. Don't keep doing this to me.
Well, that's a big reason why I am not a big physical, and I know this is sacrilege to a lot of people, but I learned my lesson with going from VHS to slightly better letterboxed VHS to DVD and then to Blu-ray, and I just can't. I don't have the disposable income to keep upgrading, and especially now with the different companies. You know, every couple of years the rights change and a new company. You know, we've got all the Arrows and the Severin films and all these people coming out with new editions of things, and so many times the extras are ported over, and we've kind of had this discussion before about different movies, but I just can't do it. So if I have to have something like The Thing, which is an example of I bought The Thing on Blu-ray and then a newer edition came out a couple months later, and there's an edition with commentary from you on it from somewhere, and I'm stuck with the one I have.
I know how it goes. Yeah, they had, I can't even remember, like I said, when I first got into DVDs, I bought Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, mostly for the commentaries, and then they would come out with, here's the Book of the Dead version of this. I'm like, wow, that looks really cool, but I already own it. I'm not about to own it again. And then even when buying the Blu-ray of Evil Dead, I was just like, which version am I going to buy? Because there's so many different versions out here. It's kind of crazy. I mean, thank goodness for some sites like DVD Beaver where they'll go through and say, these are the extras on this, that, or the other thing. But even with them, I mean, it's one person, or I don't know how many people doing DVD Beaver, but it's just like, you can't catch everything. You know, there's a new version of Runaway that's out there, and I'm like, okay, does this have anything extra versus this version? And, you know, sometimes there's sites to tell you those things, and sometimes there's not.
Yeah, and I actually tried to look at Evil Dead 2. I was deciding on which one to buy, and I couldn't make out the difference in extras, so I just bought the cheapest one, and
yeah,
it sounds like it had the same extras as whatever you have, so I know that a lot of them get ported from one version to the other, and that's the other thing that gets a little bit confusing about upgrading. Yeah, these are two I definitely don't mind having. I think I got my Evil Dead for $5 from Target, and it's got commentary and some behind-the-scenes stuff, and a not great transfer, but I kind of like that look of it, for especially for that film.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sometimes you want the grain.
Okay, Mike. Well, thank you very much for being on the show again. I left you alone for a year, kept to my promise mostly. What is coming up for you in the very near future here?
Well, we are in the middle of Polish month, so we have talked about Polanski, Żuławski. We have talked about Borowczyk, and coming up we are going to be talking about Wojciech Haas and the Hourglass Sanatorium, and then diving into a month of French films where we get to talk about, oh gosh, some of my favorite filmmakers, including Jean-Pierre Melville. So I'm really excited to finally actually talk about Les Doulos on the program, so that should be a ton of fun.
Hello and welcome to Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys. My name is Hunter. In this podcast, I'll be joined by a different guest each week to discuss a classic Western movie or TV show. I've been a fan of classic Westerns for as long as I can remember, and in recent years, they've become very nostalgic for me. I love the aesthetic, the tropes, and I love seeing different filmmakers' takes on them. At their best, they're incredibly entertaining, rewatchable, and some of my all-time favorite movies are Westerns. We'll mostly focus on Western movies made in Hollywood, but we'll also be covering spaghetti Westerns, and one thing I'm very excited to get into are Western TV shows. I've got some amazing guests coming on the show, film professors, historians, and podcasters. And Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys is part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, and many guests on the show will be from other shows on the network. Thanks for listening.
And how about your side projects like the Life and Times of Captain Barney Miller? How's that going?
That is going well. Once a month, putting out an episode about that. I was a little sad when the Kolchak tapes was over because it was so much fun talking about Kolchak, but it's definitely been a much needed break in these days to be able to sit down once a month and watch 3 episodes of Barney Miller. And also we do with my partner Chris Dashy, we do a show called Dreams for Sale along with Father Malone, where once a month we look at an episode of the Twilight Zone reboot from 1985. And some of those, well, let's just say your mileage may vary.
Right.
But sometimes there's some really good segments on there. So we've got one that's coming up pretty soon where we talk about the Invisible Man sequence, To Be the Invisible Man, I believe it's called, which is not anything like the Elizabeth Moss film, but very, very different. It's based on a Robert Silverberg story. And yeah, it's pretty terrific. So you occasionally get some great segments as you're watching that show.
Yeah, I watched that show back then and enjoyed it. And Barney Miller is a childhood favorite, so I just realized that you've already done a second episode, so that is what I'm going to listen to while I work tomorrow.
Fantastic. Well, I'm glad that I can provide some free entertainment for you.
Yes, that's the key. Free for my cheap ass.
The price is right. And then, yeah, every Friday night, as you mentioned, we are doing live streams during the plague time. And so showing a bunch of interesting movies on that. I think we're going to be rounding out the month with a bunch of very rare, hard-to-find films that I've managed to put my hands on over the years. I've got 2 of them for sure lined up. One of them is Bill Gunn's Stop, and the other one is Henry Hathaway's Super Dude. So they both kind of fit into the kind of in the blaxploitation area, but not really. But if you put them on the list, they'd probably end up there. But more than anything, they are super rare and really haven't been shown any place. But you can see them for free on the stream.
Yes, and I will be there as long as I can. It's a perfect start time for me, end of my workday, but a couple hours before dinner. I like catching what I can at least, and it's a lot of fun, especially in these strange times.
Yeah, and now you get strange movies with those too.
Which I love. So, stay safe out there in Michigan, and say hello to all your Michigander friends. I just love saying that word. And thanks so much for being on the show again, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
It is always a great pleasure to have Mike White on the show. As I mentioned earlier in the episode, it's actually been about a year since the Taxi Driver episode. And you will be able to hear us sometime in the next couple of months discuss David Cronenberg's Shivers. If you're not interested in hearing my news and notes, this is a good time to stop this episode. I wanted to discuss some changes that have happened since working from home. I broke my laptop a couple of weeks ago and was forced to buy a new one because I need it for work. And with that, I decided that I would use my laptop and the Audacity program to start recording the show. Now, the computer came in the day before Mike and I recorded, and I didn't want to chance it, not knowing how it works just yet, but I did some of the editing in there, and you may notice the noise a lot more prevalently in this, especially on my end, and I think I even managed to give Mike some noise, which his recordings never usually have. But from now on, I will be recording and editing on Audacity and mixing down in GarageBand. And I am loving this program so far. It's so much easier to use than GarageBand. And I need to thank my friend and cheese connoisseur, Jason Cooksey, for his help with my computer fiasco. Thanks a bunch, Jason. I owe you a sandwich. I hope that all of you are staying safe, being smart, keeping healthy, and I guess just generally making it through this. Hopefully we will be out of this tunnel within the next couple of months. I'm shooting for personally. I don't have much else lined up. I think I mentioned something about the Cinder on Instagram or whatever platform I mentioned it on, and it's just kind of tough right now. It seems like I would have all the time in the world to record a bunch of episodes, but it's hard with everybody here working from home and just the way time is working right now. So I can't promise anything, but hopefully something pops up soon and I find some time here in the day to record something. In the meantime, don't forget to hit iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and be good. Oh, and don't forget,
Anything can happen when you wake up heavy. Ho, 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 ho.